Hello, I'm Reverend Leantwala, and welcome to Clergy in Collars Getting Coffee. Today, I am joined by my special guest, the Reverend Hodong Hwang, who grew up in South Korea, had a degree first in electrical engineering, where he then ran a semiconductor business before immigrating to the U.S., where he eventually found himself studying for his Master of Divinity at Vanderbilt Divinity School. He later on served at Minden Presbyterian Church and a few others before settling into his current call at Western Presbyterian Church. He's been newly called there, soon to be installed. And so welcome to the show. It is nice to have you here.
Thank you, Leah, for inviting me.
So you are my first guest where we have actually not met face-to-face yet. We will meet face-to-face for the first time at your installation service.
Right.
And so that's new for me. So this is, I'm hoping others find this as interesting as I do. I'm going to be getting to know you right alongside of everybody else who might be watching or listening. So what I have learned from you mostly has been in the Presbytery of Geneva meeting, where we questioned you and received your statement of faith. And one of the things that struck me, there were several things that struck me about your statement of faith. But one that I would like to highlight first is you talk about the betrayal as part of your statement of faith, which I had never. I've read, of course, the Bible is filled of stories of betrayal, but I had never seen anybody write that as a way that they then grew their faith and shaped their faith. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about that relationships, because they seem counterintuitive to me,
Mm.
like at an initial reaction.
Yeah, I grew up in a very kind of near the seashore in South Korea, very south part of the South Korea. And I grew up there and I had a strong accent. So after I moved to Seoul, the capital of Korea, and all my friends teased me for my strong accent. So they even bullied me and I went to a church. I grew up in church in that my birthplace, and I went to church and they all welcomed me. So that was kind of a haven for me. The church
Yeah.
was the only place I could you know open myself. So I love church. There was like a 3 services in a week, every week for children, like Wednesday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday evening service. That was a long time ago.
I was going to
So
say that doesn't work for a lot of Presbyterian churches in America anyway. That
maybe in 1950s or 60s, maybe America had the same kind of practice, but in Korea it was 1970s, and I went to every service, two services on Sunday, one on Wednesday afternoon, and my mom rebuked me if I didn't go to any service. So that
I
was my
feel like that's cross-cultural. A mother's rebuking is like you needs no translation. We all
right,
understand the
right.
power of that. Yeah.
Mhm. So I grew up in church, I could say, and until my high school years, I still loved my church and went to every service in church. And even I after school in my high school years, my routine was that I after finishing my school classes, I stop by church to pray, and then before I go home, and then maybe sometimes I because church was like only 5 minutes away, like by walk. So I sometimes in the evening, like at 10 o'clock, I went to church again to pray again, and that was kind of my practice. So it sounds strange to me still if somebody does it right now, but that was who I was. And but in my high school years, I was kind of leading the high school, the youth group at that time. And again, I continue my practice of praying. And one night I heard that, the elders, the session members were fighting with each
Mm.
other in the next room. And I figured what was going on later. And then the pastor of the church was arrested and imprisoned
Wow.
for a lot of charges, like embezzlement, and he borrowed money from the members and didn't pay back, and also he had a sexual relationship with the one of church members, and anyway he was accused and imprisoned, and
And
that
that
was
just shifted your whole, because
whole
that's
thing.
also,
Like
yeah,
there was like a about more than like a close to 10 years of my faith journey was collapsing
yeah,
because of that. Yeah. And I thought like, I feel like I wasn't free. God was always a scary person to me. Like, there are a lot of rules to keep.
yes.
I would the lay people, including the students, were not allowed to that go up to the podium area, in the
Oh, really?
sanctuary. Yeah, because that
Okay.
was a holy space. So that's one example. We had like a big debate during our high school years with other, friends in high school, I mean, in church, about whether or not we can study on Sundays because it's work
Sabbath.
as a student. So Sabbath, keeping Sabbath. So one of my more pious than me, that friend, he didn't study at all until midnight, and he started to study, for exams, for example, right after midnight. That kind of very strict
Wow.
observance of the
That
law.
would not have worked for me to get, my brain wouldn't have functioned.
Right, right. I know, but he kind of sleep a little bit, in the evening, and then began to study right after midnight, something like that. Anyway, so that was kind of everything in my world at that time. Church was everything. But after that instant, you know, uh, I felt betrayed by church, and I felt like everything I learned from church was a lie. When what the leader, didn't take the what he taught seriously.
Right.
So I decided to explore my faith. So after I entered college, I in the first day I joined the Christian group called the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship
Yeah.
(IVF), and the reason was that I wasn't ready to abandon my faith, but I decided to test my faith, or whether or not it is like worthy believing,
So
or if.
that's the part that I find very fascinating, that I would say that betrayal becomes a positive, whereas generally we think of, I mean, the act of betrayal is negative, but you reframed it into this somehow of going, I need to find a way to separate the actions of my pastor from the
Mm,
actions of God,
mm,
right? That to begin to like to say, if I walk away completely, it would be because of one person rather than, you know, or the system that allowed him, or because of one person's hypocrisy.
mm,
And it's like you use that deep sense of betrayal you felt to critically think about your faith.
yeah.
And yeah.
But that was not only my pastor's problem. My mother was a treasurer of the church,
Oh, okay.
so she knew everything. That the pastor borrowed money from other church members and kind of things. And my one time, my dad called home, And then, somehow, the conversation between my mom and the pastor was rigid. There was like a surveillance, thing, installed,
Right.
but somehow I could hear the conversation between my mom and the pastor. And what, my dad was so upset, and my dad was kind of abusive guy, the abusive person for my mom. And they always fought, you know, a lot of times over the issue of churches, like general churches, other churches included, but specifically for that church. But so it was not just church issue; it's also a family issue for me.
Okay.
So when I felt betrayed by the pastor, and also felt all the things happening in my house were also involved in my consideration.
Right.
So maybe it's a positive term, but at that time I was ready to invest my 1 year to figure out, and so that I could freely, without having any guilty feeling, right, to
Right.
lead the church. So that was my kind of investment, not intending to turn to my faith again, but my 1 year became 2 years, and 2 years became 4 years. And then later I became a staff member of InterVarsity for 3 years. So that's was kind of positive turn at the end, but initially it was not the kind of decision I made with a purpose.
So hearing you describe your home life a bit and its relationship with the church life, and then that, sort of deep intentional work that you did to separate those things or determine on your own. One of the other things that you lifted up was that you feel like that's a call to a social justice, right? That you have this very deep sense of social justice. And now in your faith statement you attribute it more to having grown up living under a dictator,
Mm-hmm.
uh you know and how that shaped. But it sounds like, you know I guess, while you might not have anybody who's elected, like when you grow up in a home with an abusive parent, it's also like living with a dictator
Yeah.
in your own home. So it wasn't. And then it sounds like with some of the rules of the church, the pastor in some ways also acted like that. So you're literally living under a dictatorship in Korea,
Right.
and then you have like these mini subsets, and how it transformed, it seems, or birthed in you, is this social justice. So how does that appear in your ministry, or your day-to-day living now? How would one see that if we were to look at your life?
One of the big common characteristics, I believe, uh, for those who the pastors are, when pastors are very conservative and very like literal interpretation of the Bible. Uh, One of the common characters I feel is that they always emphasize personal piety,
Mm,
right? So they always, urge people to do their personal, faith practices like reading the Bible and prayers, and also that their messages are focusing on like how we overcome our like personal relationship or like hatred, or like how we become a law abiding person in the society, something like that. But from that experience, my dad and then my church, and also dictatorship. Uh, to be honest with you, I actually interpret the Bible in the same way a lot of times in my college years, because I had my personal issues, right,
right.
with the church. So I had to overcome that, and then my personal interpretations were kind of very helping in that sense. But later, when I understood that the kind of structure of the system. And then I didn't actually had my conclusion, but after 3 years of service in the organization, I became a corporate person. I worked for different companies. I became a president of a company there.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
do feel like that kind of background gives you a leg up on pastors like me who just went straight through and then were
right?
told to supervise the staff, and you're like, whoa, where's my class on that? I did not
Yeah.
take, I do not have that experience.
Right,
And
right.
like, but you lived in that world and worked in that world prior to entering ministry. So you have a skill set that I don't know. I can't speak for all pastors. This pastor gets envious of from time to time.
Yeah. So and for my for the period during my when I was a staff member of university, my message was kind of little somewhere between like social justice and personal piety, and
Mhm.
I tried to connect those two. But after I became a corporate person, work for different companies and also did my business, I realized that what I told my students uh, was a lie, big lie,
Mm.
because individuals cannot change much. Just only to struggle in such a system, right? So I when I came to the United States, and I was in confusion, still confused about how we connect our personal, individual faith with the kind of social system that
Mhm.
work as like a big evil power to dominate over people. So I didn't have my conclusion. Sometimes I focused on personal piety in my sermons. Sometimes I just deal with the all the issues at the time, but I didn't actually feel like how to integrate those two. Um, and my wife came to wanted to study for a master. She had two masters in Korea, but still wanted to study more in.
Yep, there's some of us who just love school. And now she
Right,
teaches at a school, right?
right,
So,
right.
yeah.
so so she came, and then I just follow her because I was very exhausted from my business, and also Korea was a very competitive society when even the young kids were forced to prepare their future even from very early age on. Like when my son was 7 years old, he went to a kind of private kind of institute, the after school program, and the teacher said, "Oh, your son is a little bit too late," because other kids already finished that course
Right.
in that age. So I thought like, oh, what kind of cruel statement is it to say, something is too late for my son at the age of 7?
Right.
So that was very shocking. My first experience. So things like that. Maybe China and Korea, they're all similar in that sense.
Yeah,
Anyway.
what I was just I mean, I'm just this is a complete aside, because I don't know. I've seen some of my friends or people who have a South Korean background,
Mhm,
whether they're first or first generation or not.
mhm,
Um, that I think it's around what at the first birthday
mhm.
that it's like you choose an object.
Right.
So is that like I mean, and there's like objects set out. It's not like you have an object of every profession in the world, right?
No,
Like
no. You
you
have
just
only
like
3 or 4.
right. And then whatever the child gravitates for, that's like supposed to sort of, I
Yeah,
guess, tell
prediction.
yeah. So do people like really hold that the part I was like, I love this idea, but I just
Mm,
wonder like how tightly does it get held to? Like if a kid picks up a gavel, you're like,
mhm.
that child is going to be a judge,
Yeah,
period.
Yeah, right.
Like,
But
even if the kid later goes, I like, actually, I wanted it to be a hammer, but the closest thing was a gavel, right?
right, right, right. Anyway, so I mean, there was another big issue for me. So my personal exhaustion from
Yeah,
my work and my wife's desire to come to the United States for her study and my son's future. So I consider all of them, and we decided to come. And while my wife was studying in Emory for 2 years, and then in Vanderbilt for her PhD, uh, I had been asked to study theology or same go to seminary from my fellow staff members or like other Christians in my whole
right.
life until that point. But I was already 38, so I was no. What can I start at my age? Like that was my thought. My
You thought the
original
same thing about yourself that that teacher thought about your son. This is like the same.
too late.
I'm too old. It's too late.
I know. But one time after my wife, we moved to Nashville, and 1 year after, somebody told me that why don't you study in seminary to become, pursue your pastorship. And at that point, I thought like I prayed about it, and then I kind of heard the kind of voice from my heart that have been confused between your personal faith and then the social like structure that actually have more control over the people than you may think,
Yeah,
right? But how do you integrate those two? And why don't you yourself figure it out? That was kind of voice I heard from my heart. So I decided to I'm kind of guy that who is very careful about my decision. When
mhm.
you go into a, like
Well,
a
I mean,
hot
you are an engineer, so yeah.
right, yeah, right, step by step. After like if you go to a hot tub,
Yeah,
some people just go right in,
yes,
but I'm kind of dip my toe first and then my knee and my thigh and something like that. That's me. So I started my seminary years as a MTS, which is not a pastorship, pursuing the course to pursue a pastorship. So
right.
that's kind of just for study itself, the for the sake of study. So I started that program. After 2 years, I transferred to a MDiv program.
Okay,
So after 3 years, I learned a lot, and I felt like I finally figured out how to understand the Bible, how to understand Jesus, and and also it was it was helpful as a immigrant and minority group person, and to interpret the Bible a little differently. One example is that, I read it, the Bible verses where Jesus approached that, sinners and, all the marginalized people. And that's what the Bible says. But as a minority person, I kind of interpret that verses different, a little bit differently, because, Jesus also had to pass their exams to be approached. Right, minority people or the people in the margin have a kind of, their own subjectivity to decide whether or not to accept it, people. For example, I went to different churches in Nashville, and some churches, from the beginning to the end, nobody approached me.
right.
Nobody say hello to me because I was the only non-white person in the church. So they just look at me kind of maybe suspiciously. I don't know, but nobody approached me.
But hesitantly for sure, if not
Right,
suspiciously with trepidation.
right. So I was the one who, of course, felt like isolated at the moment. But at the same time, I was the one who could judge the church, what kind of church it was. So I
Right.
had my own, like, autonomy or subjectivity. So I think that was the same case for Jesus. I don't know. The Bible doesn't say anything about how many times Jesus approached them to convince them. Oh, this is my genuine heart, and I want to love you guys. But Jesus also had to pass their exams, I believe.
I mean, it's interesting too, because you talk about this as well in your statement of faith, that you said the church is in the world are to manifest the kingdom of God in the world by welcoming everyone.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of hitting on, like, it's an issue of justice. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily, that itself, who we welcome, who we don't welcome, is
Right.
also an act of justice, right?
Hmm.
It's our choosing to, do we act socially and justly if we do not welcome in everyone who comes into our doors.
Right.
um and then I would also say, people, how do we welcome people who don't come into our doors, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
the church or God's kingdom doesn't end at the door frame, right, of
Right.
my congregation, or
Right.
like these walls of this particular sanctuary.
Hmm.
um and so it becomes then a call to, how does one be hospitable or welcoming and inclusive, even outside of an actual church building.
Right.
And how do we do that as God's people? So,
Yeah.
um do you think there was any way, was that something that was present at all for you when you were, like, when you had your own business? Do you feel like your business environment created any space like that said
You
everyone
know,
is welcome here?
right. I mean, when people come to church, they don't just come to church for that one Sunday.
Right.
And they bring their whole life to church, their
Hmm.
past experiences, their, what they have thought about God and church, and all kind of their faith statement. You know, Maybe they come to church to test God or to know about God or to learn about God. There are all different reasons, but the one thing is in common is they all bring their all whole life to church. One time I was a businessman, and one night, uh, there are like multiple similar cases, but in South Korea, the business practices are kind of maybe harsher than America, I guess. In
I
that,
mean, everything I've learned from K dramas. I have no real experience with this. I
right,
imagine it's a
right,
little bit amplified. Yeah.
right, yeah, like bribes are common, and especially drinking is a lot big portion of business. And I often receive a call from my customers. There were like only four companies in South Korea, four semiconductor related companies, the big major companies, I mean. So one of the guy from a purchase department of one company, called me at night, and then he asked me to pay for his drink. It was like a couple $100.
That's an
So
expensive drink. Yes.
yeah, but like a whiskey or like a spirit, they are a bit expensive usually.
Yep.
And then I went there. I asked my wife to pray for me, uh, for nothing happened, and I went there, and then the guy uh, asked me to pay for his drink, of course, and also there was a girl sitting next to him, and he asked me pay for the girl as well to spend overnight with her. And that was kind of a moment that that was kind of a little big decision, because he was a key guy of one company, and we had only four customers, semiconductor companies, and he was one of the companies. And if I lose him and lose the company, and he kind of, you know, turn his head, from our company, then, I'll lose 25% of my customer.
Right.
Right. So I usually like listen to whatever they ask me. Uh, Sometimes, they ask me, one funny case was that, one guy told me that his pastor, he was a Christian. His pastor wanted to write a book in a very luxurious hotel near the seaside. Maybe they'll help him to write his book better. So he asked me to pay for his hotel for 4 nights.
Right. At the seaside.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of such crazy things happened during my business years.
I I I mean, what's interesting, like I feel like if that were me, it would make me well question everything. I don't know. I think I might have
Yeah,
some trust issues involved in that. But then I mean it's not like, coming to the United States, that it's not as though we don't have those same, we have also those similar
I guess
cultures.
so. Yeah, I guess
And
so.
it
Like,
depends on, yeah, where you are and what your
what's
business
the
is.
title of the movie? The Wolf in the Wall Street.
Yeah, the Wolf of
Yeah,
Wall Street. Yeah,
that kind of
same.
actual practices of a lot of
Yeah,
people,
and
a lot of
and
companies, right?
yeah, and it still happens, and what you tolerate. I think you bring up some good points about like what our level of what it means to tolerate versus, I would say, what it means to accept,
Yeah.
right? That when we agree to, we put up with somebody's whatever, that's
Hmm.
tolerating. But when we
Yeah.
participate in it, then we've somehow accepted it. And this would be acceptance, I would think of in a more negative
Mm.
context, like that it sounds like that whole system, eventually you were like, it's not worth what it does to my soul
Right.
and to my being, it's not
Hmm.
worth staying in this environment. And so I want to make different choices. And I
Right.
mean, it sounds like part of, like, you were like, okay, we're just going to uproot everything and go to Emory.
So the answer was not as easy as I thought.
No,
So
it never is.
it was me alone, and also I said, no, I can't do that. And he looked in my eyes, and then said, "Are you sure?" There was a threat,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Yeah.
I said, no, I can't do this. And then I came home, but thankfully, by the grace of God, we didn't lose the customer. Uh, Somehow, he didn't continue to work there, and he moved to other department. So there was the grace of God for me. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I realized that a lot of that kind of situations, and a lot of other kinds of struggles, that's what other Christians go through in the world. Their decisions, or like they have different choices, but they struggle always. But until that point, the messages I heard from church, from the pulpit, was that why the kind of blame people, like why don't you commit yourself to church ministry more,
Right.
right? That kind of messages I heard all the time. So from my own experiences, I became obviously more generous for the people.
But it's
And
because
because,
you understood that struggle.
yeah, right. And also, as I said, people bring their whole life to church when they come to church.
Uh-huh.
We don't know what they have been through and what they have struggled about. So I try to be, kind and generous to them, and then try to listen to their stories. Sometimes I listen to people's stories like 2, 3 hours, in my office, and there was a lot of times there was like a eye-opening experience, to hear people's stories, and
Yes.
I just can't judge people like, from the first view.
Well, and I think that's a lesson, each one of us would benefit the world if we sort of not all learn that, but really embraced it as the way forward um to understand that people are right, all their ages or all their stories or all those things all at
Hmm.
once. And
Hmm.
and how we interact with each other or treat each other and how we open ourselves up
Hmm.
um in order to really hear each other's stories, right? And
Hmm.
I for me that, that place is, God is what opens us up, right? It's like,
Hmm.
knowing you talked about it as God's sovereignty as a love initiative, which is a very interesting turn of phrase.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so, that Christ, Jesus, who represents who God really is, right, in that ministry in the church. And what
Hmm.
we see Jesus doing is like we have whole chunks of that man's life that,
Hmm.
been piecemeal together. Maybe
Hmm.
it's in some of the gospels that aren't canonized. We get bits and pieces of the story and all that. But there are whole sections, huge chunks of sections of Jesus's development that we are
Hmm.
not privy to
Hmm.
as readers of that story.
Hmm.
Um, and yet what we do glean from him, what we do gain from the way that he practiced ministry is exactly that welcoming, seeing people's stories, not judging their stories, right? Like you have stories like the woman at the well and whatever, like,
Hmm.
just listening, just hearing, just bearing witness to the story and naming it for what it is without um the the judgment of saying that, I don't know. Sometimes I think judgment can come as small as going, "Oh, I would have made a different decision." Right?
Hmm.
Which you
Yeah.
may have, but sometimes that can come off real judgy to the
It
person
is,
it with.
yeah, it is interesting to read the history of Christianity. All the things, Christians did in the past. One of the things that, like, when we can discriminate some kind of, some group of peoples, for example, like, black people, for example, in 19, 18 centuries, uh, even the scientists studied about, why black people were inferior, or
Right.
like, when our, like, colonial period, they had their own studies about why they are barbarians,
Right.
right? They are not humans, they are barbarians. Black
Right.
people look like humans, but they are not humans.
Right.
Something
Which is
like that.
why we can treat them
That
the way we're
actually
treating.
show a kind of, a mixed feeling about human nature. We kind of, when we hate someone, for example, we demonize the first,
Yes.
so that we just can be justified for our hatred. So we don't just hate people. We take some kind of step beforehand before we hate people or hate
Well,
group
we
of people.
remove the person from the person, right? It's like we
Right,
can't,
right.
like if we actually looked at somebody and saw in them really the image of God,
Yeah.
then we would be unable to demonize them because we wouldn't see them as other.
Right, right.
Um, but yet, like what you're describing is we go, no, we're going to use all the means, right? All the tools at our disposal
Mm-hmm.
in order to make sure nobody looks at or so that everybody will believe the same things we believe or dislike the same group of people that I dislike. And it's really powerful when it happens, when suddenly all your systems, right, your science system, your church
Right,
system, where all of it begins to collectively tell the same stories of somebody's lack of personhood,
right,
which
right.
which we see time and time again through history. I mean, there was um I mean, I don't know that, I don't know if you experienced this, but there was a, an uptick in Asian hate during,
Yeah,
with
a couple
COVID.
of years before. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I feel like prior to COVID, there was this like model minority status.
Hmm.
And then in comes COVID and everybody blamed China. And suddenly every Asian person is Chinese.
Right.
And also, whatever. I mean, but that process, you saw it actively trying to work of like stripping away someone's humanity
Right.
and demonizing them. So I really hope that you and maybe your family as well and your churches that
Hmm.
they did not experience that
Mm.
kind of that level of hatred that was
Hmm.
present. I don't know if it's lessening now or not.
Yeah, that's what I really appreciate, for our church people. They welcome me. They are very nice to me, and they even had their own lunch right after church. There was a kind of regular practice that some of the members go to a a restaurant nearby
Oh,
every
at
Sunday.
Western?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they told me that what they talk about me, and they're all kind of positive things. And that kind of understanding of history give me a hope and despair simultaneously.
Mm,
Hope means that if we recognize each other as humans, as created in the image of God, then we can hate each other
right.
as far as we understand them as other fellow humans. That's a hope.
Right.
But despair is that we try to create kind of process to reason why we have to hate the people. So I try to break the connection between two, by bringing up more human stories about, for example, Black people in those days, like their spirituality,
Right.
like their spiritual hymns, like spiritual songs. They're amazing, right? Their
Right.
faith is like unreal.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's something you sort of have a shared, at least what you've talked about here, like that sort of shared sentiment of like even when one struggles, like there is still that despair and hope are always walking alongside person. That's one of the things I love about a word like compassion, because we think it just means like feeling greatly for somebody, but it doesn't. It actually means to suffer alongside, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
have compassion is like in some ways that bittersweet relationship, right? Like I'm walking alongside of you in your suffering because I too know what it is to suffer.
Right, right,
And I might
right.
not be suffering right now, but I too know what it is
Yeah.
to suffer. And so even if our suffering is different, we can walk alongside each other in order to
Mm-hmm.
and have greater compassion, but that's the hope, right? Um that's the hope that's birthed out of that situation. Like there are lots of things that are bittersweet that I love in this world, like chocolates and um even
Yeah.
even some fruits, like a lemon or whatever, it is a bittersweet food. Um, but it is healthy or it's good for us. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel like those places of tension,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what's it called? Isometric exercises, right? That's where you use like if something like this, right? Why you're using your own force to push against. And there's so often this tendency to think that if we want something to benefit us, right, the everything should just be let go or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the stability comes actually more in leaning into the tension
Mm-hmm.
versus separating, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes I don't know if
Yep.
that makes
Yep.
sense, but sometimes I feel like our tendency is to go, no, and to kick it out entirely, but there's actually, we're only gain the stability if we lean into the tension or the discomfort
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
uh, in our lives. And so sometimes I feel like that's the work of a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
That's the place of mediation that we sit. And then when we
Yeah.
think of Jesus being our great mediator, we're like, oh, thank God you're gonna be with me when I come stand before you. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
walk alongside me even in the judgment.
Right.
Um, and hold that, help me to hold that tension versus wanting to get away from it, because I think only true reconciliation only comes after those moments
Mm-hmm.
of staying in
Mm-hmm.
that um that space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very fascinating, and I think throughout your faith story you kind of lifted up some of these
Mm-hmm.
things. So aside from what we've discussed, like what are some of the things you do to refuel or to relax, or well, like what do you enjoy doing when you're not um pastoring all, you know?
Huh. I, you know, I like to, I like it kind of a little moment of my own thing. Like, for example, when I prepare my sermon that, I like when I feel like, oh, I'm a little stressed right now, then I just, watch like a funny YouTube video or something like that, like a five
Now, do you
minute
have a
video,
genre of YouTube videos that you like?
like a comedy or like, stand-up comedy usually.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Do you have
and then
any
I
favorite
actually, yeah, I learned kind of, their speaking skill.
from watching stand-up
Yeah,
comedians?
yeah. They have like a, like what is that? The punchline. How to
Yeah.
build up their punchline, something like that. So that's a little helpful,
Well, yeah, I've
but
talked about,
that's
like,
not
we
the
have,
main purpose, though.
they're great, but they are. They're good comedians to me are great storytellers. That's one of the
Yep,
things that
yep.
they excel in. So who are some of those people you like to watch? Because everybody's
Oh,
go-to
I
comedians are not the same.
no, I just watch one thing and then just come up with the algorithm, just give me a more
So
example. So
so in our household, we share, like all of us are connected to the same YouTube sign in. So
oh.
like our algorithm is all a mess because we have four different people with four
Right.
different personalities of what they find funny or interesting or whatever.
Yeah.
So
But it really it varies. This morning, I watched like a Lion King, the cruise, the Lion King crew from Broadway.
yeah,
They traveled to other country and they sang this Lion King song in the
yes.
plane, and that was fun. And then other kind of similar you know uh, performance just show up in my algorithm. Yeah. I watch couple before I see you.
And that helps de-stress.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just like those I would say those great moments of humanity then help you to
Right,
to
right.
maybe
And
remember to be
because
human.
I because of my own story and my own characteristic, personality, I tend to be very serious.
Mm,
And when I look back my sermons in the past, oh, I just, my all goosebump, just come up because, that was too serious. And
yeah.
nobody could understand that the profound level of my sermon at that moment. Because reading it now, oh, no, I'm not sure how many people can really understand the depth.
I I have, I mean, so I had a parishioner once say, because we mail our, like,
Sermons.
we mail the sermons to our shut-in list, right? To the people that we
Mm,
can't
I see.
right, can't. And I remember I was meeting once with one of them, and one of the guys, this was years ago now. And he was like, I really like reading your sermons. I don't always agree with them, but I like
Mm.
reading them. And I was like, I was like, truthfully, I look back on some of them and I don't agree with them. Like, like, and
Yeah, true.
that's real true because sometimes, it's that moment we're in
Hmm.
our own lives and in our own, like, as you talked about, we bring our stories too as pastors,
Hmm.
right? We're bringing
Hmm.
our story there. And some of those texts or whatever, you can tell I hadn't read certain books before I wrote that sermon, or certain life stories, certain news stories hadn't happened yet because it changes um it changes the viewpoint. Um
Yep. And also, I learned, how to make the point simple and clear from their comedies.
yeah,
And also, I listen to some mega church pastors, and there are a lot of times their messages are shallow, I would say, but still they are pretty good at focusing on their message, the point
right.
of that Sunday. So
Yeah,
I learned those skills from them and something like
and
that.
all of that refuels you. Like all of it
Yep, yep,
energizes you.
yeah. But
Now,
during
are you at like a big like, do you any activities, like, do you bike, you tennis, you walk, you golf?
I walk with my wife in my neighborhood,
Okay.
and yeah, we walk together most of the time. Yeah, that's a big
And
thing. And I love to go to grocery shopping. That's
really?
another my habit.
What is it about grocery shopping that you like? Because I really don't. I hate grocery shopping.
Grocery shopping, there are a lot of items.
Yes.
So watching items, I mean, you cannot avoid not thinking about like why do we have so many stuff here? Like why do we have like 20 different kinds of ice cream here? Something like that.
Yeah.
So
Is
that's
it like that way in South Korea? Like maybe
no,
now? No?
not that much,
Okay.
because the size of the grocery in South Korea is not as huge as here.
You don't
So
have a Walmart superstore, no Costco,
we
Sam's
do,
Club?
but there are only like a couple. If you drive like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you can find one. But the business in, especially grocery business in Korea, is really hard because if you walk five minutes this direction, you always find one, and this direction find one, and this direction find one. So my 10-minute radius by walk, you have at least 4 or 5 grocery stores. So
Wow.
yeah, it's not driving, five minute driving, it's walk.
It's walking.
So you
Yeah.
cannot compete with other grocery stores
So
if your
you
price
like
is too
going
high.
in there just like as a voyeur. You are still fascinated by the
The
amount of like
enormity of
80 different types of cereals.
that's right.
And now do you
And
always choose the same one, or have you like gone through, had you had like I mean, you are an engineer. So like, did you have a system that you went through and tried them all and be like, this is disgusting and not even fit for human consumption?
yeah, I always choose the same thing, but it's fun to look at other things too, even though I don't buy them.
Now, do
Yeah.
you feel like, do you eat more typically the same way you ate in South Korea? Do you eat a similar,
No, very
you
different.
different?
Yeah, very different. I don't eat rice like as much as in Korea. Maybe I rice maybe twice or 3 times a week. In Korea, maybe 3 times a day and 7 days a week.
Right.
Only a few exceptions, but here, totally different.
And I mean, is it just because you do more, I mean, I guess more meals? Is there more variety that you just add a different grain base versus just rice to what you're eating?
Also, it's a lot easier to prepare meals here. Like, pasta, you have like, only a few ingredients and
Yes.
put them together. And, but in Korea, we have like 4 or 5 side dishes, but each item, has to be prepared like in length of time. So anyway, grocery shopping is a big fun for me because I love to watch people, and also people buy different things, and some people are skinny, and I check what they eat, and some people are very overweight, I guess, and then I see what they eat too. Not to judge them, but kind of to understand, the relationship with their eating habit and their weight.
Well, yeah, because you wonder sometimes what it is. Because I don't always find, like, sometimes the skinniest person in a grocery store is literally buying 100% processed
Right.
foods that I think if I knowing my own body, if I ate that, I know what I would weigh.
Yeah.
Uh, but yet somehow they don't seem to. And then, but obviously you see the same way on the
Mm.
opposite scale too. There was a time that they used to talk about, like, in American grocery stores, you walked the outside edges because that's where all
Mm-hmm.
the, like, fresh stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now that because I probably because they talked about it, now that no longer is necessarily the case. You might
Mm-hmm.
not only find all your whole or least processed foods on the outer edges the way you once
Yeah. You
could.
know, you know, I don't know if you know Jimmy Yang. He's a
Yes,
kind of he's a
comedian.
comedian. Yeah. He one time said that Asian people are not proud of like how expensive thing they buy, right? They are proud of how cheap thing they buy, like how good deal they have. Like so, he said his the catchphrase of his mom is always guess how much. So guess how much. I'm part of that culture.
Or
So
that
I love
you like to find the sale.
sale, yeah.
Yeah, the
And
good
then
deal.
his mom, bought him like a extra large size shirt,
Because
even
the
though
deal
he's
was
a
too good.
yeah, right.
It,
So that
it,
was funny.
it doesn't matter if you fit it. So my mom used to, she was very similar like that. And actually, my husband always remarks on it. He was like, why do you tell people sometimes when they compliment a dress you're wearing, how much you paid for it, or like where you
Hmm.
bought it? And
Hmm.
he was like, are you bragging? I was like, yes. That's probably exactly what I'm doing, is I'm
Right.
bragging that the dress they're complimenting I got for $3 at the thrift
Mm.
store. So yes, it makes me like feel good somehow to say that stuff. And that was because of my mom. Like, she was a big yard sale shopper, shopper. Because we didn't have a lot, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. We were fine, but it wasn't a lot of money. And so, she would come back from not grocery, she'd come back from yard sailing and be like, do you know how much I paid for this suit? This is the find of the century. Like, it was,
Right,
he
right.
had such joy. And yes, just like Jimmy Yang's mom, sometimes she bought the thing because of the sale it was on, and it didn't. She's like, I'll find somebody to give it to. It's like,
Right.
then did you really save any money? If it's gonna,
Yeah, grocery store is a good place to know about human beings. Like, a kind of, a very honest place
yeah,
because they don't buy what they don't need. They buy what they need, and then the reason behind that, why they need this, is
yes.
reflecting, what they think about their family, themselves, their life, and relationship, everything.
Yeah,
So
it's true. And what you might think you deserve as well. So I think the next time I go grocery shopping, you've given me a new
yeah,
viewpoint to which
this
I'll
is
even
a
watch my own cart.
right theological place, I guess.
I mean, I suppose about everything can be. So we're about, like, at the end of that. We're at the end of the hour, and I have
Hmm.
one more question that I like to ask all my guests.
Sure.
And because I don't know what American television gets exported to South Korea, um, I don't know that this will make sense to you. So I'll do my best to explain it. And
Yep.
if you've heard of the Care Bears, then you can just stop me if you know what they are.
Okay. All right.
So the Care Bears were this American cartoon. It's right here behind me. In the 1980s, it came out. They still exist, but they are these multicolored bears, right? Each Care Bear has a different color. And then each Care Bear also has a different symbol on their belly. And they are from the they live in the land of Carolot. That's where they are. And when somebody is in trouble, or if there's an accident, or somebody's struggling, they all join hands together and they shoot this symbol, and their symbol out of their belly, and it becomes this giant rainbow, and it's called the Care Bear stare. So it's like this unique gift to them that they shine out into the world in order to heal the world, or make the kingdom, the land of Carolot, back into order, or whatever. It's about reconciliation and healing, not about punishing the person who missed it. So for me, as somebody who was a child when the Care Bears first came to the scene, now as an adult who's a pastor, I've looked back at them now of thinking that they do more for me, like representing your the Holy Spirit. They would be modern day symbols of the Holy Spirit for me, like more than just like the fire, the cloud, the dove, the wind. So my question always is, if you were suddenly a Care Bear, Hodong, if you were a Care Bear yourself, what color Care Bear would you be? So what color fur would you have? I'm purple. That's clearly me behind you. And then what symbol, right? What is something that is uniquely you, a gift that you have from God, that you feel like you use in God's world in order to bring healing and reconciliation?
I want to be a Care Bear in purple as well, and with a big belly.
With a really big belly. And what's on that really big belly?
Because every Sunday I love to give hugs, and I love to hug with people, and I give like at least 30 hugs to those people. One time, in my second Sunday, I guess, and somebody as they exit the sanctuary, somebody said, "Oh, I lost my daughter 20 years ago," and and I saw her face, and her face was still sad, even though it's 20 years ago. So I gave her a long and warm hug as much as I could. And I knew people behind her were waiting, but still, and I give her a big hug, every Sunday almost. So you know, barely helps, if you give big, a long hug.
Yes, that big bear hug, the belly is
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah. If you don't have belly, it doesn't feel like same as big belly
It
bear.
doesn't. You
Right.
are correct.
Right.
You are
So
correct. So would like that in like embracing symbol be on like the picture on the belly? Would it be like a
right,
hugging type symbol?
right. So I respect that, again, people bring their whole life to church.
Mm-hmm.
So I really point that out because, the reason I love to give people, big hug is because, they need God,
Mm-hmm.
right? In any point of, especially when they struggle. One woman who began to come like a couple of weeks ago, and she used to come more often, but she didn't come for a while, and I that's what I heard. And she was divorced 9 years ago, and she lost her ex-husband at the age of 70.
Mm.
So, but the husband was over 70, but they got divorced in their 60s. And then I saw her Facebook, and then her daughter also posts, kind of her response that, "Oh, my dad abandoned us, mom," something like that.
Right.
So I gave her a hug two Sundays ago, and then I felt sorry for your loss. I also said sorry for the resentment of your daughter. It's really hard to. It's not kind of something I want to judge. Like even. in the time of his passing, she still had a grudge, against him. But I gave her a hug and then told her that, I really wanna comfort your daughter as well. And she came last Sunday.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So when people feel accepted, they have more things to say than just one big hug,
Yeah.
because again they bring their whole life to church.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I appreciate it. I thank you for spending time. Getting to know you a little bit better. I now am looking for, I too am a hugger, so I'm looking forward to meeting you face to face, very soon. And it is a joy to have you and your gifts as the newest people in the Presbytery of Geneva. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Leah. Oh, it
All
was
right.
fun. Thank you.
All
You're
right. Thank you.
such a good moderator.
I don't know about that all the time, but thank you.
Thank you. All right.